Story 1. My grandfather passed away a week ago, and I only found out today. For some context, my father, who is their son, is an alcoholic. My mother eventually divorced him and raised me as a single parent. My grandmother was so upset about the divorce that she reported my mother to Child Protective Services, which was a major red flag right there. Growing up, my grandparents were a significant part of my life. My mother worked long hours and didn't have much support, so I spent a lot of time with them. Those years hold some of my happiest memories, especially with my grandfather. He was an incredible man, someone truly special. Sweet, gentle, and with a heart of gold, he was the kindest person I've ever known and likely will ever know. About a year and a half ago, my grandmother called me during a tough time in my life. She started saying hurtful things, accusing me of being a failure and wasting my life. Her words were completely unexpected, and it turned out she had been drinking. I asked her to stop, but when she wouldn't, I ended the call. That incident led to her ignoring me for over a year. I continued trying to reach her, calling almost every month in hopes she'd pick up. Finally, this past summer, she answered. I was so overwhelmed with emotion that I cried. I had made significant changes in my life. I was thriving in my apprenticeship, in a stable and happy relationship with my boyfriend, and everything seemed to be falling into place. After a month of trying to schedule a visit, I finally saw my grandparents at the end of August. My grandmother kept rescheduling, saying she and my grandfather weren't feeling well, which made sense since he was 91. The visit was wonderful, and I told her about my busy schedule working over 60 hours a week, managing other commitments, and trying to move. I asked her to call me when she wanted to talk, and we could plan another visit. Time passed, and I didn't hear from her. When my birthday came and went without a call, I assumed she might be upset with me again, so I decided to give her space. That brings us to today. I was at a restaurant with my boyfriend when she called. Excited, I picked up the phone. We started chatting normally. I told her about work and how I had been moving in with my boyfriend over the past few weeks. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "Your grandfather is dead." Shocked, I asked. "What?" she replied. "Yes, he passed away last Friday. He had cancer and was in the hospital for 6 weeks." At that moment, I felt a wave of grief and had to step outside because I started crying. She went on to say there wouldn't be a funeral because he didn't want visitors at the hospital. Then she added, "You and your sister must hate us for not calling or visiting." That's when it hit me. She was using my grandfather's death to punish me for not giving her enough attention. I had told her how busy I was with work, planning a friend's wedding, and moving, which left me barely enough energy to handle daily life. I was in survival mode, overwhelmed but trying to stay afloat. I had even made it clear she should call me since my free time was so limited. Throughout my life, my grandmother has used the topic of inheritance to manipulate everyone in our family. She instigates conflicts and then dangles the promise of money to make people seek her forgiveness, even when she was the one who hurt them. As I've grown older, I've realized how deeply narcissistic she is. While I understand she's endured significant trauma, her family fled Germany during the Holocaust, she uses emotional manipulation to control others. She once abandoned her own sister on her deathbed because of a disagreement she had caused over a year before. Now, I can't help but wonder if my grandfather truly didn't want visitors, or if she twisted the situation for her own reasons. I feel heartbroken thinking about how she may have kept him from seeing the people who loved him in his final days. I just wanted to see my grandfather one last time, but she took that from me. For her, it's always about control. She managed the phone because my grandfather was nearly deaf, so he couldn't have called me even if he wanted to. Thank you for reading this far. I'm emotionally drained and heartbroken, exactly as she intended. It hurts to think she could do this, knowing how close my grandfather and I were. I was busy, yes, but I was also trying to build a new life for myself. If she had wanted to talk, she could have called. I had made that clear. Now, my grandfather is gone forever, and I'll never have the chance to see him again. Story 2. Some background. I'm a male registered nurse and work in the emergency room of a medium-sized hospital. I mostly work nights. In Germany, you get more money when you work night shifts because the time and night shifts are longer than normal day shifts. We work 3 different shifts: morning from 5:30 am to 2 p.m., day from 11:30 am to 8 p.m., and the night shift from 7 p.m. to 6 am. So I've got some stories. At nights the real stuff happens. Oh, that happened pre-COVID, so no mask, visitors were allowed, yada yada. So that night I worked at the front desk. So mostly doing admission of the patients, handling their healthcare IDs. We have universal healthcare, suck it America. And well, I was just manning the reception. This was I think around 1 am, so the emergency room was relatively empty. At night, there are like 3 hours when something is happening rarely. So yeah, I sat there, sipping my 3rd cup of coffee and chatting with a fellow nurse. Then the entitled parents arrived. I didn't see them coming. Excuse me. There she was. A thing I only knew from the internet. A Karen. In Germany. She had the typical haircut and that "I'm better than you" vibe. In tow she had a man. He seemed normal. Me? Oh, sorry. How can I help you? With the perfect customer service smile. Karen? Ooh yeah, I'm searching for my daughter. Her sister texted me that she is here. Her name is X. Typing at the keyboard on the PC. Ah yes. She's been admitted here. Karen? Well then, what does she have? Can I see her? Now I have to explain. We've got some privacy law here in Germany, so if you're a legally adult, 18 and over, you have full privacy, and without your consent, I can't give anyone any data. Not the parents, not the siblings, not the significant other, not the kids. So yeah. Sorry. I can't give you patients' data. That's against the law. We are her parents, and she's our child. She's 18, so she's an adult. Without her consent, I can't tell you anything. But I can call the doctor she is seeing and ask. Karen crosses her arm. Fine, but make it quick. She was tipping her feet on the ground. I'm taking the internal phone from the desk and making the call. The daughter doesn't want her parents there and denied them any information. That's her rightful choice. Me, I'm sorry, but your daughter denied you any information. Karen, what? Meltdown is about to start. I'm her mom. Bring me to her now. Ma'am, please lower your voice. That's a hospital. Yes, and I want to know what's with my daughter. I'm her mother. She should share everything with me. Well, I don't need you to find her. She then passes the desk and goes in the direction of the treatment rooms. Hey, you can't go there. I get reinforced with another male nurse and a male nursing student and block her way. All this commotion had attracted the attention of the attending emergency room doctor. He stormed out of his office. Our night doc is a good doc, but well, he has some temper. Attending doctor, what's going on here? Karen looks smug and says, Ah, good a doctor. These men are blocking our way to our daughter. She must be scared to be alone here, and we need to comfort her now. Attending doctor didn't take her nonsense. He asks me, so her daughter? Yes, she's here with Dr. XY. She's 18 and denied her visit and any information about her health. Karen, liar, our daughter is only 16. Attending doctor, yeah well, listen lad. Now he crosses his arms. I believe this guy here slightly more. If you proceed to invade this space, where only patients and staff are allowed, I'll have you escorted out. You can wait in the waiting room. The husband looks smug like his wife. What will you do? Have the security throw us out? No, I will do it myself if you are not leaving this instant. Probably sees that she has the chances of a popsicle in hell. Karen says, I will sue this hospital. I know the management. She stomps out her husband in tow. If she shows up again, call security immediately. Well, lucky enough, Karen never came back that night. Her daughter was seeing a gynecologist that night about something with her lady parts. She told me, I escorted her out at like 3 am, that her parents went nuts every time about such things, how they hate her boyfriend and claim she is too young to date. I assured her that they won't get any data from us and that she can always come here. We are servants to the community. Story 3. I wasn't a bad dad. He turned out pretty good, journeyman electrician, works at a F500 company. Anyway, when he was 16, a long time ago, he needed $30 for a school trip. I gave it to him several days in advance. The night before the school function, he told me he'd spent it and needed another $30. I finally forced it out of him that he'd bought weed. I don't have a problem with that. If you put all the things I've smoked in a pile, it would be bigger than a house. But now he needed more money. So I said, "Okay, you go with me to the store and do what I ask, and I'll give you more money and even throw in a little extra." He agreed, having pretty much no choice. I grabbed something out of the kitchen on the way out. We went to Target, kind of an upscale joint around here for simple crap. But before we got out of the car, I told him the deal. You have to wear a hat made of this aluminum foil, and you can't talk to anybody. If somebody says something or asks you a question, just mumble, "I can't take it again, not like last time." He agreed. I made the hat, including a little point on the top and 2 flaps that covered his ears. I put kind of a tail at the back. It looked perfect. I walked around the store, and he had to stay at least 10 feet away so people wouldn't think we were together. I heard him mumble unintelligent stuff a few times as people stared and walked past. He never broke character, and we walked through nearly every section: electronics, toys, men's and women's clothing, auto, pharmacy, food. It took nearly 45 minutes for me to grab the 3 things we went for. I gave him the cart and enough money to pay for it and watched as he went through the line. When we got back to the car, I said screw it. He did a good job and gave him $50. Ida. I thought about making him buy a pack of embarrassing stuff, a raw chicken and some Vaseline, but I just got what we went there for: engine oil, a head of lettuce, and some eye drops. Ida too, for all wondering about how much damage his psyche experienced. He graduated with honors, became a licensed journeyman electrician, and is employed by a world-renowned company. This happened nearly 20 years ago. He now has 3 lovely kids of his own. This might also clear up some of the pricing of weed comments. He's the kid who could name all the planets in order when he was 3 years old. He knew I'd give him the money whether he did anything or not. I think he accepted the terms to get the little more and maybe to have a good time with Dad to make up for spending it on weed. I am quite proud of him. Story 4. It's a beautiful day outside. Birds are singing, flowers are blooming. On days like these, it's an absolutely perfect day for riding. It's the first non-rainy, no plans day this week, and I've been wanting to get back in the saddle for a while now that winter is over. So, me and my mom get our horses ready and head out. We live in the countryside, specifically Amish country, so horses are really common around here. My neighbor has horses. The neighbor on our other side actually sold us their horse when they moved because they couldn't take him. I even saw a lady riding down the street a couple days ago. Point is, horses are not a rare sight, and these dogs should have been used to seeing them and known better. We were heading down the road and about to pass a house with a barn opposite it when 2 dogs came sprinting from the yard behind the house. One was, I believe, a black lab and the other a little Australian cattle dog. My mom managed to stop her horse in time and keep her calm, but I didn't have time to react before the cattle dog came biting at my horse's legs. Tinkerbell understandably panicked, which I do not blame her for, and I knew I couldn't hold on when she bolted, so I took my feet out of the stirrups and pushed myself off into the grass so I could go down of my own volition. Hit my head, landed on my shoulder. Thank God I was wearing a helmet. The headache and ache in my shoulder still haven't gone away, and I can't imagine how much worse it could have been. A lady came out of the house with her phone in her hand and half-heartedly called the dogs in. Thank God my horse didn't bolt down the road. She actually came back, and once I was off the ground, I took her reins and led her back next to Jetta and my mom. The lab walked back up the driveway closer to her house, but the cattle dog was still barking at me and Tinkerbell, and I'll be honest, I was about a second away from kicking this dog myself, if my horse didn't get to it first. My mom asked her to call her dog back, and she said, "You pretty much just have to walk past her," completely ignoring the fact that I just went down and her dog was still going after us, barking and getting far closer to my horse than either of us were comfortable with. Again, she asked her to get her dog, and the woman said that she was a herding dog and that she couldn't do anything about it, calling her dog back one time, which it ignored, and then going back to her phone. The audacity of this woman to let her dog just go after my horse without doing anything to stop it because it's a herding dog, and telling us to go past the house when it's still going after my horse. A car had been coming down the road and it turned into the driveway, so the dog finally moved out of the way back into the yard finally. I only got back on my horse after we were far, far away, and we had a nice 4-hour ride after that incident, though I wasn't interested in going much faster than a slow walk because of my headache. While our dogs do bark at horses going by, they do not charge them, and our little border collie knows well enough not to go nipping at a horse's heels. Please, for the love of God, if you're in a rural area like this and your dogs aren't used to horses, keep them on a leash or behind a fence, be it physical or electric. Edit. For those of you saying I should report her, I'm going to contact the dog control officer for her town and see what can be done about the dog. Too many other horses on the road and the dog's likely to get hit if she allows it to run out into the street like that. Story 5. I'll call myself the original poster op for this story. I work at a local restaurant in my town as a waiter. In May of this year, our previous general manager, whom I'll call Cherry, resigned due to pregnancy and personal life events. It took about 3 or 4 months before we finally hired a new general manager, whom I'll refer to as Jackson. At first, Jackson seemed like a nice guy. He was quiet and somewhat reserved, which was quite different from Cherry's bubbly and outgoing personality. However, that was understandable since he was adjusting to a new environment. Little did we know that these differences would only scratch the surface. Jackson turned out to be a complete disappointment, and I can't stress that enough. Here's why. 1. Chronic absenteeism and poor communication. Jackson frequently showed up late or didn't show up at all without notifying anyone. This was incredibly ironic because he was the one responsible for enforcing standards of communication among employees and scheduling our shifts. His behavior caused several issues. When Jackson didn't arrive as scheduled, we were often left wondering what in the world was going on. When he did show up, usually later in the day or even the next day, he rarely offered an excuse, and if he did, it was pitiful at best. One day, he didn't show up at all and couldn't be reached by phone. He arrived the following day and had the audacity to say, "Well, it doesn't matter why I was gone, it just matters that I'm here now." His dismissive attitude was infuriating. He often left the restaurant mid-shift to help his girlfriend, who supposedly worked at a nearby shop, without informing anyone. On one occasion, only a cook and I were left to run the restaurant. Luckily, we weren't busy that day, but the principle of abandoning his post was maddening. Jackson left before his shift ended without notifying anyone. This created chaos when another waitress, whom I'll call Sarah, arrived late one day and needed a manager's card to clock in. With Jackson missing, Sarah had to wait for another shift manager, Brenda, to come in and help. Sarah ended up waiting 2 to 3 hours just to clock in for her shift. Jackson never apologized for these incidents. He acted as if nothing was wrong, further undermining the morale of the team. 2. Inflexibility with scheduling. Unlike Cherry, who worked around our schedules when given sufficient notice, Jackson was rigid and inconsiderate. Shortly after he started, we hired about 8 new cooks and hosts. While this initially seemed promising, Jackson's unwillingness to accommodate their availability led to nearly all of them quitting within weeks. Only 1 or 2 stayed on. 3. Mismanagement of resources. Jackson often ordered unnecessary items while neglecting urgent needs. One time, our dishwasher was breaking down during a busy shift. When our shift manager, Kaylin, called Jackson for assistance, he somehow concluded that we needed more pancake batter, a completely unrelated item. He then hung up on Kaylin and didn't show up to help us that day. 4. Ignoring dress code. While managers at our restaurant aren't required to wear all black like the rest of the staff, they are expected to dress professionally. One day, Jackson showed up wearing sweatpants and a hoodie. When another waitress, Tara, pointed out this double standard, he left and didn't return for the rest of the day. 5. The final incident. Jackson's last day was nothing short of a disaster. Faulty kitchen equipment, including the dishwasher and the order machines, caused delays of over an hour for customers during a busy rush. We eventually had to stop seating new guests to manage the chaos. Instead of stepping up, Jackson continued his habit of shirking responsibilities. At one point, another waitress, Abby, and I needed Jackson's assistance with an issue only he could handle. After searching the restaurant, we discovered that Jackson had left without notifying anyone. His car was gone, and he was unreachable. With angry customers demanding to speak to a manager, I had no choice but to explain that our manager was missing. Tara eventually called Kaylin to inform her of the situation. By then, Jackson had used up all his chances. Kaylin called to terminate him, but Jackson quit on the spot to avoid being officially fired. 6. Revelations after Jackson's departure. After Jackson left, we discovered that he hadn't kept up with the restaurant's bills and utilities, leaving Kaylin and Brenda to catch up on payments. He had been fired from several previous management positions before joining us. Somehow, he still managed to get hired at our restaurant. Conclusion. Cherry was an excellent manager who genuinely cared about her job, and her employees a rarity these days. Her absence was deeply felt, especially when compared to Jackson's incompetence. Fortunately, Brenda has since stepped up as general manager, bringing over 20 years of experience at our restaurant and even more from previous jobs. As for Jackson, I can only hope his next employer is better equipped to deal with his antics. Good riddance. Story 6. In a nutshell, my 34, female ex-boyfriend, Sven, 44. Male could be accurately described as someone with antisocial personality disorder. Of course, that was never apparent to me while we were dating, but those familiar with antisocial personality disorder will know that many individuals with this condition wear an elaborate mask and lie as easily as breathing. This is true of Sven. When I met him, we quickly became close friends. We had a couple of weeks where we thought we might start dating, but he wanted to move way faster than I was ready for, so we remained in the friend zone instead. He was progressive, emotionally intelligent, and generous. We loved the same music, shows, and activities. He showed vulnerability. He shared his traumatic childhood backstory with me. He leaned on this story often as a pillar of his victimhood, which he uses to manipulate everyone around him. He also shared, very early on before anything physical ever happened, that he was positive for herpes simplex virus type 2. Not to say that there were zero red flags about this guy, but the good I saw in him was so overwhelming that I had an easy time dismissing them. We started dating in an unusual way. During our friend zone time, this lasted about a year, he had moved out of state to be with a new partner, Melody, whom he had been dating for only a few months. He never shared many details about her, and I had assumed that they had some history that explained the seemingly sudden seriousness of their relationship. Then, seriously, like 2 months into the move, Sven started to message me in a more flirtatious way. He told me he loved me and that it took moving away to realize what we had, etc. Obviously, this made me really uncomfortable. I told him I wasn't interested in being the other woman or in a long-distance relationship of any kind, and that he and I needed to keep it platonic. He tried to make it work with her for several more months while telling me how she was an alcoholic and that she would yell at him. Eventually, he told me that they broke up and that he was making arrangements to move back. He was still living with her, though. He began sending increasingly flirtatious and romantic messages. This is the point where I almost escaped him, but he was clever enough to make friends with my roommate 31, non-binary, Eris. Eris and I have been living together for 7 years. A serendipitous friend of a friend turned roommate situation evolved into a deep besties friendship. Eris helped convince me that he was really a good guy who was madly in love with me, and that despite the weirdness of his moving out of state and then changing his mind, I should finally give him a real chance. Without going into great detail about the relationship, I can say that the typical idealize and devalue pattern of emotional abuse began to emerge pretty soon after we moved in together, though he was really sweet most of the time. He moved into the townhouse I shared with Eris about a year after he moved back to town, and we'd been dating officially for 6 months. He lived with us for almost a year and a half. Like any person with antisocial tendencies, he was lying about a lot, being manipulative, and cheating beyond belief. By sheer intuition to glance at his phone one evening when the three of us were at home together, they saw him open, close, and then like an Instagram direct message of an inappropriate photo. They instantly texted me, as I was sitting opposite him on the couch. Yes, the absolute nerve, and I called him out. He angled his phone away from me to delete the message thread, but Eris saw him do it. He denied everything and dismissed our concerns, denied the message, denied deleting it. I didn't know who to believe, my partner or my best friend. Honestly, I believed them both and thought there must be some rational explanation that let Sven off the hook without invalidating what I believe Eris saw. I could not imagine that he could look me dead in the eyes and lie to me like that. He cried and played the victim in all this. A day later, he came up with a plausible explanation for the phone incident, that the photo was sent to his friend by a fan of their band because she had gotten a tattoo of their logo or something, and that the friend sent it to him to say, "Hey, check this out, inappropriate." He had private conversations with both Eris and me, and we later found out that he had used different reasons catered to our own biases to excuse himself for the lying and dismissive behavior. To Eris, it was his religious trauma, which I'd never heard about before, but Eris grew up queer and Christian, and he knew it would resonate with them. And to me, it was past relationship trauma of his insecure and paranoid ex over policing his social media use. At this point, he was on thin ice with me, and I didn't really know how he was going to be able to rebuild the trust. But we lived together and had just adopted a dog together, and our lives were so intertwined, I just wanted to go back to normal if we could. I really wanted to believe him and not destroy our lives over some inappropriate photos on his phone. Then, just a couple of weeks later, Eris went to a party at Sven's ex-roommate's house. Sven had left the roommate situation on pretty bad terms, burning the bridge with the ex-roomie whom we'll call Lun. One of Lun's friends, Holly, pulled Eris aside to tell them that Sven was cheating on me. Apparently, Holly had been exchanging inappropriate messages with Sven a few months back. He had begun to get really pushy about convincing her to have a threesome with him and another girl, Tiara. He even sent her Tiara's private photos. She eventually got uncomfortable and stopped responding. He responded to being ignored by getting upset and aggressive with her. When confronted, he denied everything and willingly handed over his phone, which had of course been cleared of all evidence. He dismissed our concerns and cried. He even threw up. I asked him for the truth so many times he gazed into my eyes and told me I was the love of his life and that none of this made any sense, and why would Holly lie and make this up? I wanted to believe him so badly, but I contacted Holly and she provided the evidence. I kicked him out immediately. He packed up some clothes and left that night. I told him to get the rest of his belongings while I was at work and to never speak to me again. Then I blocked him on everything, and that was the last I spoke to him. Eris was not so tolerant. So begins the satisfying part of this story. As Sven was packing his bags to get out that first night, I was numb and in shock and still very used to protecting his feelings and shielding him from my friends' criticism, so I did not let Eris vandalize his car like they wanted to. They did write "liar" on the hood in lipstick, though, and we took some pictures with it. After he left, Eris did the thing that would open Pandora's box. They posted a warning on social media. They are something of an internet personality and make their living on TikTok, so their Instagram has decent reach. The Instagram story simply showed his profile and gave the warning that he is dishonest and unfaithful. The release of this information hastened Sven to come a day earlier than planned to get the rest of his stuff. I was at work and planned to stay there until he was gone. Eris had made plans to make his move as miserable as possible. The night before he came to pack up, Eris and I disorganized his meticulously curated record collection, moving records into the wrong sleeves while de-alphabetizing the sleeves themselves. Eris wanted to break them, but I wouldn't let them. I was still protecting him. I did allow them to scratch some and let the dog bite a couple of them and tear some of the inserts. Eris also removed all of the strings from his bass guitar and disposed of one of his pedals when I wasn't around. Bless them. When he came to collect his belongings, Eris blasted "I Don't Want You" by Big Sean on repeat until he packed up his soundbar and then proceeded to continue to play it on their phone as loud as they could. They threw dog kibble at him as he packed his things in the living room while booing him and yelling "shame." Eris would not allow Sven's brother in the house to help him move. Eris is approximately 6 feet tall and can be intimidating. Sven argued and tried to bring his brother inside, but Eris physically blocked the door, yelling, "Don't come into my house. You do not have permission to be here. He is not getting help. He is going to do this himself, and he is going to suffer." This is my favorite part of the story, honestly. Eris mocked and laughed at Sven and took video of him, moving his precious mid-century modern dresser down the stairs on his own as his brother stood outside, helpless. Towards the end of his eviction, I messaged Eris that I'd found Tiara's the threesome partner / long-term affair Instagram account. Eris yells to him, "We found Tiara." And after that, he had a fire lit under him so hot, and he finished up so quickly, that he forgot to take a bunch of his belongings, including his 55-inch Roku TV, an IKEA bar cart, a humidifier, a collection of really nice art supplies, and a cool hanging lamp that we love. Score for us. Meanwhile, Eris's post gained local attention, and suddenly both Eris and I were receiving direct messages from women who had information. He was either in their messages being inappropriately persistent, or they had been exchanging intimate messages with him, or they had met up with him and they had relations. We found that he had a completely different approach with these women, asking them to do intimate things he never even brought up with me, pressuring them for private photos, pressuring them into making intimate videos with him, and getting inappropriate and pushy with a lot of them. He constructed different lies for different affairs. Some were short-term, some were ongoing for months. I'm pretty sure he was involved with Tiara for about a year. She thought he and I were in an open relationship. We found out from an old acquaintance of his that this is not Sven's first public exposure for this behavior, and that his marriage back in 2017 ended on eerily similar terms. After he had moved to New England for his marriage, he had to move back to our state after being exposed. As screenshots and stories rolled in, I began to realize that he was not sharing his herpes simplex virus type 2 positive status with any of these women. I saw a screenshot of him telling someone that he had just been tested and was negative for any infections. Alarms start blaring in my mind. He was not only manipulating women into intimacy with lies about he and I being in an open relationship or just denying my existence in general, he manipulated one long-term affair partner who had gotten wise and found my social media accounts. But he was also withholding sexual health information. This is predatory. This is intimate abuse. Period. Eris makes another post, this time much more incriminating, and shares that he is an abuser and predator. The fallout from that second post is even worse for Sven. At this point, he's losing friends and messaging partners left and right. We get into contact with the most recent ex. Remember Melody? Well, it turns out that he did not break up with Melody when he said he did, and that when he moved back here, she and he were still a couple, so he had been unfaithful to her with me after all. When I told him we couldn't be flirtatious or romantic when he was in a relationship, he just decided to pretend he wasn't. But he still later used the "I made a sacrifice for you, I moved back here for you" manipulation tactic with me on many occasions. Melody, fortunately, used to live in our city and used to work at the venue that Sven's band was booked to play at in the coming week. Melody went ahead and put a word in with the venue, asking them if they really wanted to feature predators on their stage. The venue dropped the show, which clued in Sven's bandmates to the situation, who decided to dissolve the band. Now, it's been over 6 months and a lot of therapy sessions for me, and at this point, I'm just trying to move on and recover, and never date another man for the rest of my life. Then a couple of weeks ago, Eris received some new information. The acquaintance who told us about the ex-wife in New England still follows Sven's activities, and she shares that he's now posting clues that he's dating someone new. She provided the Instagram handle of the new partner. Let's call her Haley. Eris told me they wanted to reach out, and I said go for it, just leave me out of it. Turns out, Sven is back at it with his old patterns. Haley, of course, knew nothing of his public shaming or past behavior. She got the same excessive affection and illusion that I got from him, no pressure for private photos or intimate pestering. Just a sweet and attentive tortured soul with so much love and generosity to give and a sad childhood. But anyway, Eris finds out that they've been talking for several months. Haley lives in New England, and Sven was planning to move up there to be with her. See a pattern, folks? She had plane tickets and had planned to come here to visit him the upcoming weekend. Eris provided Haley with all the screenshots she asked for, and I think even put her in touch with one of the affair partners. Empowered with the truth, Haley ended things with Sven and blocked him everywhere. Unrelated, but we heard that he also posted that he crashed his car and had to borrow money from one of his last remaining friends to get it fixed. I also hear that he's gone down to part-time at his job and may be on the way to being fired. He works in the music industry and information gets around. Nobody wants someone with a damaged reputation on their payroll. Last, I found out from Eris that Sven is now planning to move to the East Coast to live with his one remaining loyal friend, the one who paid for his car. So life ruined by being unfaithful to me, and all I had to do was have a cool friend.